The Crusades, a time of warfare and religious zeal. The Crusades were a defining chapter in medieval history, embodying the intersection of faith and conflict. Spanning nearly 2 centuries, these campaigns were driven by religious fervor and the ambition to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control. They also reflected broader socio-political and cultural currents, leaving a legacy that extended far beyond their immediate goals. The Crusades were not just wars. They were a symbol of medieval Christendom's aspirations, struggles, and contradictions. 1. The origins of religious zeal. The Crusades arose during a period of intense religious devotion in Europe, marked by the increasing power of the Catholic Church and a belief in the centrality of faith to all aspects of life. The role of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church played a pivotal role in inspiring and legitimizing the Crusades. By the 11th century, the Church had established itself as the dominant institution in Western Europe, wielding influence over both spiritual and political matters. The papacy used its authority to frame the Crusades as a divine mission, offering spiritual rewards such as indulgences and remission of sins to those who participated. Pope Urban II's sermon at the Council of Clermont in 1095 was the catalyst for the First Crusade. Urban framed the campaign as a moral imperative to aid fellow Christians in the Byzantine Empire and to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. His call resonated deeply with a society steeped in religious belief, inspiring thousands to take up the cross. The concept of holy war. The Crusades institutionalized the concept of holy war in medieval Christendom. Unlike earlier wars which were fought for territorial or political reasons, the Crusades were portrayed as a spiritual duty. Participants believed they were fighting not just for worldly gains but for the salvation of their souls. This fusion of faith and violence created a powerful impetus for action, uniting people across social and national lines. Pilgrimage and redemption. The Crusades also built on the tradition of pilgrimage, which was an important aspect of medieval piety. Pilgrimage to Jerusalem was considered a profound spiritual act, and the idea of reclaiming the Holy Land resonated deeply with Christian beliefs. For many, the Crusades were seen as an opportunity to undertake the ultimate pilgrimage, combining physical sacrifice with spiritual redemption. 2. The Crusades as a series of wars. The Crusades were not a single event but a series of campaigns, each with its own goals, participants, and outcomes. Despite their shared religious motivation, the Crusades often reflected the political and social dynamics of their time. The First Crusade, 1096 to 1099, triumph and tragedy. The First Crusade was marked by remarkable success for the Crusaders, culminating in the capture of Jerusalem in 1099. This victory, however, came at a great human cost. The massacre of Muslim and Jewish inhabitants of the city shocked even contemporaries, underscoring the brutal nature of the crusading ethos. The establishment of Crusader states, such as the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Principality of Antioch, represented a new phase of European involvement in the Middle East. These territories served as Christian enclaves in a predominantly Muslim region, creating ongoing tensions and necessitating further military campaigns. Subsequent Crusades, struggles and failures. The subsequent Crusades were less successful than the first, reflecting the growing challenges faced by European forces. The Second Crusade, 1147 to 1150, ended in failure, while the Third Crusade, 1189 to 1192, achieved limited victories under leaders like Richard the Lionheart but failed to recapture Jerusalem. The Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, took a dramatically different turn, as Crusaders attacked Constantinople instead of the Holy Land. This diversion, driven by political and economic motives, deepened the divide between Catholic and Orthodox Christians and tarnished the moral legitimacy of the crusading movement. The later Crusades. The later Crusades, including the 5th, 6th, and 7th campaigns, reflected diminishing enthusiasm and effectiveness. By the end of the 13th century, the Crusader states had been lost, and the crusading movement began to decline. Nevertheless, the idea of holy war persisted, influencing later conflicts such as the Reconquista in Spain and the expansion of Christian Europe into pagan territories. 3. Warfare and innovation. The Crusades were a crucible for military innovation, as European forces adapted to new challenges and encountered sophisticated Islamic armies. Siege warfare. Siege warfare became a defining feature of the Crusades, as both sides relied heavily on fortified cities and castles. The Crusaders constructed impressive fortresses like Croix de Chevaliers, while Muslim forces developed advanced techniques for defending and assaulting strongholds. Naval power. Control of the Mediterranean was crucial for the success of the Crusades. European maritime states like Venice and Genoa provided ships and expertise, enabling the transportation of troops and supplies. Naval engagements and blockades became key strategies in the struggle for dominance. Cross-cultural military exchange. The Crusades facilitated the exchange of military knowledge between Europe and the Islamic world. Crusaders adopted techniques such as the use of composite bows and improved siege engines, while Islamic forces adapted to European heavy cavalry tactics. These interactions enriched the military traditions of both civilizations. 4. Religious zeal and its consequences. The intense religious fervor that inspired the Crusades also had profound and often destructive consequences. Violence and intolerance. The Crusades were marked by extraordinary violence, often justified in the name of faith. The massacres of Muslims and Jews during the Crusades exemplified the darker side of religious zeal, as the pursuit of spiritual goals overshadowed ethical considerations. These acts deepened divisions between religious communities and left a legacy of mistrust and hostility. The persecution of heretics. The crusading spirit was also turned inward, as the Catholic Church launched campaigns against heretical groups within Europe. The Albigensian Crusade, 1209 to 1229, targeted the Cathars in southern France, resulting in widespread destruction and the consolidation of church authority. Strengthening of the Church. Despite the controversies, the Crusades initially strengthened the Catholic Church's position in Europe. The papacy's ability to mobilize large-scale campaigns demonstrated its power, and the Crusades reinforced the Church's role as the spiritual and moral leader of Christendom. 5. Cultural and intellectual impact. While the Crusades were primarily wars of conquest, they also facilitated cultural and intellectual exchanges that enriched both Europe and the Middle East. Transmission of knowledge. European crusaders encountered advanced Islamic science, medicine, and philosophy during their campaigns. The translation of Arabic texts into Latin introduced Europeans to the works of classical scholars like Aristotle, preserved and expanded upon by Muslim thinkers. This knowledge fueled the scholastic movement and laid the groundwork for the Renaissance. Art and architecture. The Crusades inspired new artistic and architectural styles, blending European and Islamic influences. The pointed arches and intricate ornamentation of Gothic cathedrals, for example, were partly the long-term legacy of the Crusades. The Crusades, while ending in the late 13th century, left a legacy that profoundly shaped the political, cultural, and religious dynamics of both the Christian and Muslim worlds. Their influence extended into global history, impacting concepts of warfare, interfaith relations, and cultural development. 1. Political legacy reshaping power structures. The Crusades transformed political landscapes in both Europe and the Middle East, establishing new norms and reshaping governance. Consolidation of monarchies in Europe. The Crusades contributed to the decline of feudalism and the rise of centralized monarchies. Kings like Richard the Lionheart of England and Louis IX of France used their involvement in the Crusades to bolster their authority. As lords sold land to fund their participation, royal power grew, paving the way for the emergence of the nation-state. Strengthening of the papacy. The papacy emerged as a powerful institution capable of uniting Europe under a common cause. The ability of popes like Urban II and Innocent III to mobilize crusading armies demonstrated the Church's influence over secular rulers. However, as the Crusades faltered, the Church's authority was questioned, planting seeds for later movements such as the Reformation. Enduring fragmentation in the Middle East. While leaders like Saladin achieved remarkable successes in uniting Muslim forces, the Middle East remained politically fragmented after the Crusades. The Mamluks expelled the Crusaders but faced their own internal struggles. These divisions would leave the region vulnerable to later invasions, including those of the Mongols and the Ottomans. 2. Religious legacy. deepening divides and new paradigms. The Crusades profoundly influenced the religious landscape, shaping how different faiths viewed themselves and each other. Christian-Muslim relations. The Crusades entrenched animosities between Christians and Muslims, many of which persist to this day. The violence and destruction wrought by the Crusades remain a poignant memory in the Islamic world, often invoked in modern narratives about Western intervention and imperialism.